Now, we know that the traffic between the US and Mexico is usually immigrants from Mexico going over to the US. So, you know it's crazy when the Mexican people are calling for the US to go to Mexico. By now, you've probably heard of the protests that are going on in Mexico City that have been sparked by Gen Z influencers.
Massive protests breaking out in Mexico City. More than 100 police officers were injured in these violent clashes outside of the National Palace. Demonstrators, many of them Gen Z, accused the president of ignoring cartel violence and rejecting U.S. help to combat it.
They are protesting at the Capitol and against their current president, Claudia Sheinbaum. It's no secret that the country of Mexico is a narco state. Hell, just last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, The Marksman, which is a 2022 movie starring Liam Neeson, which by the way is a super good movie, showcases the cartel's ability to function here in the US. Most well-to-do people in Mexico benefit from a symbiotic relationship with the cartels. And according to the Mexican people, this includes politicians and goes as far as the president, the current president. However, not all politicians are trying to be friendly with the cartel. Some take an active stance against them. Unfortunately, this usually doesn't end well for anyone that takes an active stance. And as you can probably guess, it didn't go well for a certain mayor who decided that he wanted to try and fight the cartels.
The unrest follows the assassination of a mayor who had criticized Sheinbaum's approach to fighting drug cartels. Absolutely. And by the way, people should understand, not only was that mayor murdered in public with his wife and his child there, but then a few days later, another mayor was executed. He was actually decapitated, his head placed on the hood of his car. This kind of stuff happens all the time.
Now, the killing of this mayor, who was trying to actively fight against the influence of the cartels, sparked outrage among Gen Z influencers, which then sparked the protests in Mexico City, using this tragedy as a way to rally the people to fight against cartel influence, mostly against their own government's use or their own government's profiting from beneficial relationships with the cartels. I'm actually kind of awestruck by the response. If you look at it, based on what I've seen so far, the protesters, they're only attacking government buildings, which is sad to say. It's impressive. Compared to the protests that we have here in the US, it seems like when we're trying to protest something like wrongful killings, government areas are not the places that get attacked. It's usually local businesses that get attacked. So I just wanted to shout out these protesters for pretty accurately putting their outrage where it belongs. Now, you'd think that this show of solidarity by the Mexican people would result in a appropriate response by their leader. Unfortunately, her response is questionable at best.
Yes, in fact, Claudia Sheinbaum printed out the names of all the Gen Z influencers like yourselves who were encouraging people to come out and protest, which is like putting a list out for the cartels.
That's right. According to reports, her response was not promising the Mexican people that she would take an active role against the cartels. She didn't mention anything about using the police. She didn't mention about anything about taking the aid that the US is offering them. No, her response was to make a list of the Gen Z influencers that encouraged the protest. I guess if you use the One Piece pirate flag, that automatically puts you on a wanted list, on a wanted poster. And it's pretty lore accurate, at least. According to these influencers, it's gotten to the point where they don't even care where the aid is coming from. Right, left, they're even wanting to take aid from Russia.
The Generation C, One Piece. We don't care if that piece come with American flag in the left
Yeah.
arm or the right arm. We don't care. We want peace. The situation we're living in Mexico is crazy.
When the Mexican people is desperate, as Nacho said, we don't care if it's Russia. We don't care if it's Russia. We don't care if it's the United States. We just want collaboration. We just want collaboration to end this problem for once and for all. We want peace for the Mexican people. We want growth for the Mexican people.
Now, reports say that the U.S. has offered aid. An older report, that these reports go all the way back to the beginning of this year. But I guess in the president's perspective, the issue isn't that severe. And she's rejected any aid that the U.S. is willing to give to combat the cartels.
President Claudia Sheinbaum says she rejected an offer to have U.S. troops fight drug cartels on Mexican territory. Sheinbaum confirmed President Trump made the offer during some of the calls the two shared since January. She says while the two nations will work together, she will not accept having the United States Army in Mexico.
A Mexican senator, Lily Tellez, I think I'm pronouncing that right, disagrees with this stance and says that Mexico absolutely could use the aid that the president and that the U.S. is offering.
Is Mexico a narco state?
Yes, it is. And we all Mexicans know about it. And Mexicans are afraid of the alliance between the Mexican government and the cartels that have infested our nation.
Can you explain this alliance between the president, her party, the Morena party, and the cartels?
Yes, the party has financed, has given, the cartels have given so much money to these politicians, narco politicians of Morena, to get into office, to get the power. So they protect, the Mexican government protects the cartels. That is why President Sheinbaum doesn't want the strong American leadership to help Mexico defeat the cartels.
Currently, interventions are basically restricted to what we could do on our side and on, I guess, international waters. From what I've gathered, it's been limited to just drone strikes against boats that are allegedly smuggling drugs from the cartels. And reports say that at least 15 boats have been struck down.
This would essentially open a new front in the president's military campaign against cartels, which is thus far focused on strikes against alleged drug-carrying boats. Well, on Saturday, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced what appears to be the 15th boat strike in the Caribbean.
For now, time will tell whether or not the protests are going to be effective, if they're going to make any lasting change, and whether or not we are going to be able to perform interventions, military interventions against the cartels. If you're in Mexico or if you recently visited, if you have any recent experiences going over there, comment down below what your perspective on the situation is. The most experience I've ever had in Mexico was spending like one night in Tijuana, like almost 10 years ago, and then maybe a trip to Ensenada here and there off of a cruise ship. That's only usually a couple hours, a tequila tasting, whatever. So I don't really spend too much time there just because of all the crap that I hear that goes on over there. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be stuck over there. Anyway, that's it for me. This is Josh. I'll see you guys in the next one.